Ok, bonjour à tous. On va commencer avec la prière d'hommage à Manjushri. Et ensuite, on va continuer avec la...
We'll continue with our study of the Abhidharmakosha.
Chom den de chom pe yang la cha tsa lo kong ge lo je chen ne chen je nye da nam da sha se we chi nye ten ke zi xie zi jie ne jie to ka le ba se kong ta zi pi zhen ra la ma je mun to dong e jie jie we Totso kin la po jie tra se yin la to jie yang ten so. Tota cha cho nyo mo nye long le gie cha cho de ze jie. Ma re mun sa do nga la nyo gu ji nye che ze she te nam. De ne ta ji sa ju ta la sun yan ten le zo ke se ta wa ko. Chu ta chu tong chu ne kin che da le mun sa chong pe yang la de te de che ji chen ra a sa ge. Da le te mo mun pa ra se ne. Ka tong ten she shun lo to pa ye. Lo zhen po pe no wa tsa la to so. Donc, on va continuer.
So we will continue our study of the Abhidharmakosha, which was composed by Vasubandhu. The previous times, we covered the preambles, the 5 preambles. We covered the explanation of the established conclusions of the Vaibhashika view. And we began the first chapter. In fact, we got quite into the first chapter because we're almost at the end of the first chapter. The point that we left off at concerned the complete classification of the dhatus. It was the last classification where we looked at the 18 dhatus and classified them according to different points of view. For example, there is a classification into what sees and what does not see. And that was the last classification that we covered before the supplementary points which follow. It's the complementary part at the end of the chapter. And then concerning the classifications found in this supplementary part, this concerns the classification of the certain timing of the support. And now we come to the next part, the reason for the support and the supported. Hello. This part, the reason for the support and the supported, includes two parts. The reason for defining as support and the reason for defining consciousness according to support. The first part, the reason for defining as support, production of consciousness is connected with the presence of an object and a faculty. The support for this moment of consciousness is the faculty. Why? If the faculty changes, consciousness changes. Whereas, if outer objects are modified, this doesn't change anything for the consciousness. For example, if the eye is foggy, it lacks clarity, and due to this lack of clarity, consciousness cannot grasp distinctly. However, if we put medicine in the eye, then vision clears up, and this is felt by visual consciousness, which can then clearly grasp and distinctly grasp its object. Khelzang Puntso gives another example, and the eye can have a bruise if we get hit, or Khelzang Puntso gave the example of playing cricket. At this point, then, visual consciousness will experience pain. However, in terms of outer objects, if we cut them, if we hit them, visual consciousness is not affected. However, if we hit the eye faculty, this is felt by visual consciousness. Then Khelzang Puntso gave an example to illustrate what a support is. He said, I'm on a seat, this seat is my support, and if the seat is not here anymore, then I'll fall. So this is the explanation of what a support is. In terms of our subject, that of consciousness and faculty, consciousness relies on the faculty. The faculty is the support of consciousness. We find this in stanza 45, lines 3 and 4. Because their change produces change, their support is I, etc. The second point is the reason for defining consciousness according to the support. Consciousness takes the name of its faculty. In Tibetan, we say eye consciousness, not visual consciousness. The name of the faculty itself gives the consciousness its name. In stanza 46, lines 1 and 2, thus, because they are unshared, they give the name to their respective consciousness. We saw earlier that faculty is the support of consciousness because the faculty is essential for each moment of consciousness. Consciousness takes its name from its respective faculty. There are examples to illustrate. We could have a pillar, the color red or white, or a tree, different objects. We can consider different objects. They could be a tree, a pillar, the color red, or the color white. For a moment of consciousness to be produced, there's not necessarily a need for the color red or the color white or a tree or a pillar, the pillar, to be present. If the color red is not present, then the moment of consciousness can be produced in relation to or by the color white or by the pillar. The object of the visible is not essential. What is essential is eye faculty. Eye is the unshared cause in this process. It is the essential element for producing a moment of visual consciousness. This is why we designated what we call visual consciousness in English, eye consciousness. And not consciousness of the visible. Khelzang Puntso illustrates this with an example. The sound of a drum. In order for the drum to make a sound, there needs to be a drummer, a drumstick, and a drum. Out of these three, which is the most important? Concerning the person playing the drum, they are not essential. They could play a different instrument. A drumstick could be used for something else, a different function. The only element that is essential to produce the sound of the drum is the drum. The person, the drummer, and the drumstick can make noise. A person or a stick can make noise, but in order to produce the sound of the drum is what is essential. So we don't say the sound of a drumstick, and we don't say the sound of the drummer. We say the sound of the drum. Now we come to the following point. Which is another classification of all of the dhatus. This point is called certainty of level for faculty, object, knowledge, and support. You can find this on the outline that you have. It is point 6. 1, 0.4, 0.7, 0.4, 0.2, 0.6. It's about halfway down the page. Here, when we talk about certainty of level, the level at hand here refers to the realms of existence. The desire realm, that's one level. Then there are 4 levels in the form realms and 4 levels in the formless realm. So here we ask ourselves a question. If a person in the desire realm sees something, in other words, a person in the desire realm who sees a visible object, for example, if this person sees something, then the question we'll ask ourselves is, the visible object, the eye faculty, the body, and the visual consciousness, these 4, do they belong to the same level of existence, or do they belong to different levels? Concerning a human who sees something, is the thing that is seen, the human's eye faculty, the body of the human who's looking, and the visual consciousness, do these all belong to the same level of existence, or do they belong to different levels? This point will be covered in 4 subsections, subpoints. The first part we'll look at this concerning the eye. This is application in and of itself of the case of the eye. Then there's a second point, which is a presentation of the fact that this is similar for the ear. And then the third point is the certainty of level for nose, tongue, and body, including a general case and a particular case for the body. That's the third point. And for the fourth point, there is a presentation of the uncertainty of level in the case of the mental. We'll begin with the first part, the application in and of itself, the case of the eye. And so we ask this question again. If a person of the desire realm sees a visible object, then the visible object that the person sees, the person's eye faculty, their body, and their visual consciousness, do these 4 belong to the same level of existence, or do they belong to different levels? And we will look at various cases. There are cases where, at the same time, these 4, the visible, eye faculty, body, and visual consciousness, all belong to the same level. And there are other cases where these 4, the visible, visual faculty, body, and visual consciousness, belong to different levels. We will look at 3 cases. In the first case, we will look at a case where these 4 elements, the visible object, eye faculty, body, and visual consciousness, in all of the examples that will follow, we'll be talking about these 4 things. So we'll look at the first case where all of these belong to the same level. And Khelzang was teaching, and he said, the example will be myself. I belong to the desire realm, and when I look at a visible object, this visible object also belongs to the desire realm. I myself belong to the desire realm. So in this case, the 4 elements that we have listed belong to the same level. And the visible objects that he's looking at are part of the desire realm. His visual faculty, as he is a human being, and humans are part of the desire realm, then his visual faculty belongs to the desire realm. His body, again, belongs to the desire realm. And his visual consciousness also belongs to the desire realm. So these 4 belong to the same level. When we talk about the desire realm, this is the realm where we find the 3 lower levels, and then in the upper levels we find humans, demigods, and gods of the desire realm. That this distinction isn't expressed here. In this case, we're talking about humans, and these beings belong to the same level, the desire realm. So that concludes the first case. Now we come to the second case. We'll continue with the example of Khelzang Puntso, of a human being. As he is a human, his body belongs to the desire realm. But if, based on his practice, he enters into meditative absorption, and based on this meditative absorption, he actualizes the first meditative absorption of the form realm, then at this point we can ask ourselves the same question: are these 4 elements visible objects, eye faculty, body, and visual consciousness, do they belong to the same level? And if not, then which level do they belong to? Here the answer is that these 4 no longer belong to the same level. In this case, where Khelzang Puntso has actualized the first meditative absorption of the form realm. Out of these 4, the visible objects and the body belong to the desire realm. The visible doesn't change. The body is still a human body. These 2 belong to the desire realm. However, eye faculty and visual consciousness belong to the first meditative absorption. Then we come to a third case. Continuing with someone, Khelzang Puntso again, who is in the desire realm and who has activated the first meditative absorption of the form realm. In this case, the person won't be looking at the objects of the desire realm, but objects of the first meditative absorption. It's possible. So in this case, the four are organized somewhat differently. The body belongs to the desire realm, and the three others, eye, faculty, visual consciousness, and visible objects, belong to the first meditative absorption. We can find a lot of examples of this in commentaries. In order to understand or discern which element belongs to which level, it's necessary to have a bit of a foundation. So that's what we'll look at now. We'll give some explanations to understand why all of a sudden eye faculty is in the form realm and consciousness as well. Concerning faculty, eye faculty, in this case, we are looking at the point that considers the case of the eye. Here the rule is that an eye faculty can see its own level or a lower level. However, this faculty cannot see a higher level. The rule, again, is that eye can see its own level or a lower level. However, eye cannot see a higher level. We can consider an example. The example is eye or eye faculty of the first meditative absorption. The eye of the first meditative absorption can see its own level, in other words, the first meditative absorption, and also lower levels. In this case, there's only one lower level, that of the desire realm. We can consider another example, eye of the second meditative absorption, eye faculty of the second meditative absorption. This eye is capable of seeing its own level, in other words, the second meditative absorption, and it can also see the levels below it. In other words, it can also see the first meditative absorption and the desire realm. So this concerns the eye. Concerning consciousness, the additional information that's given relates to visual consciousness of the first meditative absorption. It is special. As opposed to the visual consciousness of all the other levels, the visual consciousness of the first meditative absorption is special because it can grasp the visible of lower levels. It can grasp the visible of its own level, the first meditative absorption, and it can also grasp the visible of higher levels. There will be some more explanations on this just a little bit further down. So that's concerning consciousness. Then we come to the body. Here the rule is that based on any body, one is capable of perceiving everything. Let me remind you that we are looking at the case of the eye, of visual faculty. Based on any body from any level, we're capable of perceiving everything. A body of the desire realm, a body of the first meditative absorption, or a body of the second, third, or fourth meditative absorption. Based on any of these bodies that we have just listed, we are capable of perceiving everything. We can perceive all the visible, in other words, the visible of all the different levels. In terms of the body, there is no limitation. We can have a body of the desire realm or the first, second, third, or fourth meditative absorption. This has no importance. Based on any body, we are capable of activating vision of all of the different levels. That's concerning the body. However, for the faculty, as we saw in the beginning, this is different. The faculty is limited. It can see its own level or levels below it. We will see how the consciousness of the first meditative absorption is special and how this works by explaining the exception of this one. We'll understand the others. Body, visible objects, visual consciousness, and eye faculty. There are cases where these four are identical, they all belong to the same level. And there are cases where some will be in the desire realm, others in the first meditative absorption. That concerns the examples that we've looked at up until now. So now we come back to the various possible combinations. We saw a combination where all four belong to the same level, the desire realm. This is the example of Khelzang Puntso, who's looking at an object of the desire realm. His body is from the desire realm. His visual consciousness is from the desire realm. He perceives visible objects of the desire realm. And his eye faculty is also from the desire realm. These four are from the same level. That's an example where all four are identical or belong to the same level. And now the question that we may ask ourselves is, are there other cases where this is possible, where all four belong to the same level? The answer is yes. There is one other possibility where these four, body, consciousness, visible object, and faculty, belong to the same level. This sole other possibility is in the first meditative absorption. In other words, the first level of the form realm. We're no longer in the desire realm, we're in the form realm, which includes 4 levels. And in the first level, it is possible for these 4 to all belong to the same level. This is the only other possibility where these 4 will be from the same level. For a being living in the form realm on the first level of meditative absorption, they have a body of the first meditative absorption, they have eye faculty of the first meditative absorption, they see objects around them which are objects of the first meditative absorption, and consciousness also belongs to the first meditative absorption. All 4 belong to the same level. Why is this the only other possibility where this is the case? Now we will look at this. The only cases where all 4 are from the same level are in the desire realm and in the first level of meditative absorption in the form realm. Why is this not the case for the second, third, and fourth levels of meditative absorption? Well, it isn't the case. It's not possible. Why? Because for the second, third, and fourth meditative absorptions, there is no visual consciousness. So when we say this, that in the second, third, and fourth meditative absorptions of the form realm, there's no visual consciousness, this means that the visual consciousness of these beings, those of the second, third, and fourth meditative absorptions, it doesn't belong to their respective meditative absorption. Visual consciousness that is present for beings in the second, third, and fourth meditative absorptions is in fact the visual consciousness of the first meditative absorption. They borrow visual consciousness of the first meditative absorption because in their own level there is no visual consciousness associated with that level. For example, in the second meditative absorption, there are visible objects. There are beings with a body. They have eye faculty. There are visible objects. Their body is there. And the visual consciousness itself is borrowed from the first meditative absorption because at this point, there isn't a visual consciousness associated with this level. The same is true for the third and fourth meditative absorptions. Due to this, in these places, in the meditative absorptions, 2, 3, and 4, these 3 levels of the form realm, the 4 elements cannot be identical. These 4 elements related to seeing something. Visual objects, faculty, eye faculty, body, and visual consciousness. In the last 3 levels of the form realm, these 4 elements necessary to see something cannot belong to the same level. The first, for example, in the second, third, or fourth meditative absorption, they will have an eye of their own level, objects and a body of that level, but concerning consciousness, they will all borrow consciousness of the first meditative absorption in order to see things. So these 4 elements will never be from the same level in these 3 levels of the form realm. For I faculty, I itself, this is different. There is I faculty of the second meditative absorption, the third meditative absorption, and the fourth meditative absorption. And each faculty is superior to that of the level preceding it. Gods of the second level of the form realm borrow the visual consciousness of the first level, but they don't do this for the faculty because there is one for their level and the quality is better. In the same way, gods of the first meditative absorption of the form realm, they won't borrow the I faculty of the level below, that of the desire realm, because their I faculty is better quality. And beings from the second, third, and fourth meditative absorptions borrow the visual consciousness of the first meditative absorption. They do this because there isn't one relative to their own level. The first time that we hear this, it may seem a bit complicated or abstract, but as we hear it, again, over time, we'll understand it better and better. What we explained here is found in stanza 46, the third line, through stanza 47, the second line, which reads, "A body does not possess the eye of a lower level. The eye does not see the visible of a higher level. Thus, because they are unshared, wait a second, what? There's an issue with the root text in English, something got skipped. It says, the same is true for consciousness, visible phenomena, and the two of the body also can belong to all of the levels. So, the first point is that the visual consciousness of the first meditative absorption can see all of the levels. The second main point is that I faculty cannot see the visible objects of higher levels. It can see visible objects of its own level or levels below. And the third point is that based on any body, we are capable of seeing the visible of all of the levels up through the fourth meditative absorption, up through the highest level of the form realm. So we can repeat, there are 3 points to retain. Visual consciousness of the first meditative absorption can see all of the levels. I faculty cannot see the visible of a higher level. It can only see its own level or levels below. And the third point, based on any body, we are capable of seeing the visible of all levels. And when we talk about all levels, we're talking about all levels where there are visible objects. This is why Khelzang told us here, based on any body, we are capable of seeing all levels up through the fourth meditative absorption, the highest level of the form realm. he didn't talk about the formless realm because, as its name indicates, there are no forms. There's nothing to see there. Well, I said there, but it's not even a place. It's a realm, the formless realm. There's no eye to see because there's no objects. We have now concluded the point, which is called application in and of itself in the case of the eye. We looked at the case of the eye, visual consciousness, eye faculty, visible objects, and where they can be found in terms of the different levels. Which level do they belong to? The following point is called, everything is in the title, presentation that this is similar for the ear. The root text says, the same is true for the ear also. Everything that we saw concerning the eye, the previous point concerning visual consciousness, eye, visible objects, this applies to seeing and can also be applied to hearing. We can talk about ear faculty, sounds, and auditory consciousness in the same way that we did for visual consciousness. The explanations are the same. As it's something that we can deduce, we won't go over all of the details. The root text simply says that the same is true for the ear, and it's up to students to transfer it all over. And that was a short point, and now it's done. Now we continue with the following point. Certainty of level for the nose, tongue, and body. There are two parts to this, a general case and a particular case. The general case comes first. We covered visible objects and sounds. Now there are three elements left to consider: nose faculty, body faculty, nose faculty, tongue faculty, and body faculty. Stanza 47, lines 3 and 4 says, for these three, everything is of their level. For these three faculties, these four elements, body, consciousness, object, and faculty, belong to the same level. Why? Because they grasp their object with contact. For everything concerning nose, tongue, and body, gustatory consciousness, olfactive consciousness, nose faculty, and tongue consciousness, as well as smells and tastes, these four elements always belong to the same level. It's simple, other than one particular case, which is what follows. The particular case concerns the body. For the body, there are two possibilities. a body of the desire realm, or the first meditative absorption. In this case, the four elements, body faculty, tactile consciousness, tactile phenomena, and body belong to the same level. Once again, this is for the desire realm or the first meditative absorption. The other possibility is a person of the second meditative absorption. In this case, the elements do not belong to the same level. In the second meditative absorption, there is no tactile consciousness. Similar to what we saw for the visible, the being of the second meditative absorption will borrow the tactile consciousness of the first meditative absorption. In this case, the body belongs to the second meditative absorption. The tactile phenomena belonged to the second meditative absorption. The body faculty belongs to the second meditative absorption. However, tactile consciousness belongs to the first meditative absorption. That concludes this point. The mental is what remains to be seen. The title is Presentation of the Uncertainty of Level in the Case of the Mental. We find this in stanza 48, line 2. For the mental, this is not fixed. We saw that concerning the eye, there are very specific rules. The faculty sees its own level and levels below. The visual consciousness of the first meditative absorption can see all levels. In the case of mental faculty, we don't find all of these rules. There aren't really limits or constraints. Based on mental faculty of the desire realm, mental consciousness of the three realms can appear. Based on mental faculty of the desire realm, we can have mental consciousness of the three realms. For example, based on mental faculty of the desire realm, we may have mental consciousness of the desire realm, or mental consciousness of the four meditative absorptions of the form realm, or mental consciousness of the four spheres of the formless realm, levels of the formless realm. And the same is true for mental faculty of the first meditative absorption. Based on the mental faculty of the first meditative absorption, mental consciousness associated with higher meditative absorptions, in other words, meditative absorptions 2, 3, and form of the form realm, or mental consciousness relative to the formless realm, or related to lower levels, in other words, the desire realm. Let's take a short break. Now we will continue with the last three classifications of the first chapter. The last three classifications of the dhatus. We were looking at the classification of what sees and what does not see. This is where we saw all of these classifications with supplementary points. Now we come to the classification into object of this or that consciousness. This is the last part of the chapter, and it's not very difficult. This point, classification into object of this or that consciousness, this brings us to a question which we find the answer to in stanza 48. We ask ourselves if the six consciousnesses can grasp these six sense objects. The stanza says, 2 consciousnesses know the 5 outer. This means that there are 6 consciousnesses that grasp the 5 sense objects. When we talk about the 6 consciousnesses, this refers to the 5 sense consciousnesses and the mental consciousness. They grasp the 5 outer sense objects: visible objects, sounds, smells, tastes, and tactile objects. There are 6 consciousnesses that grasp 5 objects in the context of the 18 dhatus. Each of the consciousnesses is a dhatu. The objects are also each a dhatu. That's 6 plus 5. 11. The remaining dhatus, which mental consciousness is capable of grasping the 5 sense objects. Sorry, so rather than talking about consciousnesses, we're talking about the sense objects. The sense objects can be perceived by the 5 consciousnesses. And so the 13 remaining dhatus, the 6 faculties, the 6 consciousnesses, and the dhatu of mental objects, what grasps them? These 13 dhatus are only grasped by mental consciousness. This classification says there are 2 classifications, the 5 sense objects: visible, sounds, smells, tastes, and tactile phenomena. These 5 are grasped by the 5 sense consciousnesses and the mental consciousness. These 5 dhatus can be perceived by the 6 consciousness dhatus. The remaining 13 dhatus are only grasped by the dhatu of mental consciousness. This is one way of classifying the 18 dhatus. How are these 18 dhatus the object of this or that consciousness? Now we come to the following classification. This is the second to last classification in this chapter. This is the classification into permanent and impermanent. We find the explanation in the fourth line of stanza 48, which reads, "Unconditioned phenomena are permanent." Here we find the classification of the 18 dhatus into those that are permanent and those that are impermanent. As the stanza states, permanent dhatu corresponds to unconditioned phenomena. As we may recall, the three unconditioned phenomena are included in the dhatu of mental objects. Out of all of the 18 dhatus, only unconditioned phenomena are permanent. So there's just one part of the mental objects dhatu that is permanent. And as a reminder, the three unconditioned phenomena are space, cessation without the means of examination, and cessation by way of examination. That's a pretty easy classification. There's one part of the mental objects dhatu, one part of one dhatu that is permanent. Everything else is impermanent. This brings us to the last classification, the final point in this chapter, which is called classification into what is governing faculty and what is not. We find the explanation for this in stanza 49. We'll see out of the 18 dhatus which are governing faculty and which are not governing faculty. The stanza reads, "Part of the mental objects and the 12 stated as inner are governing faculties." Here, Khelzang told us that this stanza 49, the lines of this stanza are a link with the second chapter. The second chapter is entitled Governing Faculties. And in the chapter, we'll talk about the 22 governing faculties. And be aware that when we talk about governing faculties, this doesn't mean the 6 sense faculties. We use the word faculty, and concerning the 6 sense faculties in the first chapter, there's an explanation. But when we talk about governing faculties in the second chapter, 5 sense faculties and the mental faculty. Governing faculties does not refer to this. A governing faculty, as its name indicates, governs something. And this is the subject of the second chapter. Nevertheless, we will classify the 18 dhatus according to those that are governing faculties and those that are not. So, to begin, we'll look at the dhatus that are not governing faculty. A non-indicative matter these 3 unconditioned phenomena which we just reviewed. Space, cessation without means of examination, and cessation by way of examination. Sometimes to go faster we say space and the two cessations. Then it goes faster. So, coming back to our list here, non-indicative matter, the 3 unconditioned phenomena, and the 5 dhatus that are the sense objects. These things are not governing faculties. The remaining dhatus, 12 and a half. These are governing faculties. And this concludes the first chapter. The last point of this chapter is a little teaser for the second chapter. Do you have questions concerning what we have covered today? I don't understand how in the form realm, the second, third, and fourth levels, how can we have I that becomes is able to see more clearly but no visual consciousness? In fact, there is visual consciousness, but it is not a visual consciousness of the level in question. In the Abhidharma, it's explained that this doesn't exist. But as beings indeed see things, beings of the form realm, their primary occupation is practicing meditative absorption, meaning that when they are in meditative absorption, they are not looking at visible objects. For example, they're in meditative absorption. This is their primary activity, their main pastime, we could say. Sorry, I don't have direct knowledge of these levels, but it's explained that they spend most of their time in meditative absorption. And they use their senses, but there isn't a visual consciousness relative to this level. But in order to relate to things, to see things, they use the consciousness of the lower level. How does this happen? It's explained that they endow themselves with, or they borrow the visual consciousness of the lower level. It's a consciousness, so they can't take it in a material way, but in any case, it is explained like this. I can't explain exactly how they go about borrowing the consciousness of the lower level. However, the effect of this is that the 4 elements at hand are not of the same level. That's the purpose of this classification. Just a technical question. We saw the first part, explanation of the reference text. Is there a second part? first part, the explanation of the reference text. The second part is presentation of the title. When there are parts, sections like this, the first part is the whole explanation of the chapter, and the last section, the second section, which falls into the same level in terms of the outline, this refers to just this last sentence that follows stanza 49, and which reads, end of the first chapter of the Abhidharmakosha Karika, entitled Presentation of the Dhatus. So sometimes in this treatise we'll find there are three main parts of the chapter. The first main part is one line, the second main part is basically the entire chapter, and the third main part is one stanza. In our maybe habit of study in the West, we're used to having sections that are more or less equivalent, and here in the case of this text that is not the case. Something that I don't understand concerning sense faculties in relation to governing faculties. I don't understand the difference between governing faculties and sense faculties. Yes, that's quite normal. All of the details, all the explanations on governing faculties haven't arrived yet. It's entirely normal that you can't determine the difference. The purpose of the last stanza of chapter 1 is just to introduce this. It's a transition that links with chapter 2. So chapter 1 ends with a presentation of something that we don't know. And so then, of course, we're asking ourselves, what are governing faculties? I don't understand the difference between these and the ones that have been presented previously. What does it mean that they govern something? And plus it said that there are 22 of them. But in fact, chapter 2 explains this. There will be many points to explain all of this. I don't understand how a human being whose body is in the desire realm, but they're looking at the desire realm, but then based on meditative absorption, they can look at the form realm. But it sounds like faculty, if I understood correctly, it's subtle matter. So their body is in the desire realm, but how can their faculty attain the level of the first meditative absorption? I don't know either. Yes, it's easier to understand when a human being develops meditative absorption, that at the moment of this meditative absorption, their mind is no longer a part of the desire realm, but part of the form realm. However, concerning faculty and visible objects, it's more complex. From memory, I don't recall the explanation. Maybe in the question and answer sessions we talked about it. I'll have to go through the text and see if Khelzang Puntso talked about it at another point in time. Because indeed the faculty is material. It is something material, despite the fact that it is not directly perceptible by our senses. It is indeed material. might have something to say, but we're not entirely sure, so the question remains. It's not a question, just a clarification concerning I. I got lost when I was taking my notes. I think I missed something. Are 1, 2, 3, and 4 part of the same level? So we can say visible faculty, visible object, body, and visual consciousness. Based on the body, we can see all levels. It's not the body itself that sees. The body is a support for the eye. A little slower, please. Based on body, eye faculty is present. This is what we're talking about when we talk about body. Then there's the faculty, eye faculty. This sees all levels except higher levels. Yes, the eye faculty of each level will see its own level, and it is also capable of seeing the level or levels below it. So it's not all levels, it's its own level and those below it. Yes. For example, eye faculty present in the desire realm, it sees its own level. As there's no level below it, it only sees its own level. The faculty of the first meditative absorption, eye faculty of the first meditative absorption, sees the first meditative absorption and can also see the desire realm. The eye faculty of the second meditative absorption sees the second meditative absorption and also the first meditative absorption and desire realm. And then visual consciousness is its own case, indeed. If there are no questions, no further questions, we can jump into the beginning of chapter 2. We have a few minutes. We can just start the second chapter with our first session here in 2025. So, the second chapter of the Abhidharmakosha, the presentation of the governing faculties. This chapter has two parts. The presentation of the reference text of the chapter, and the presentation of the name of the chapter. The first part, the presentation of the reference text of the chapter, is made up of three parts. The nature of governing faculty, the mode of birth of conditioned phenomena, and the explanation of causes, conditions, and fruits. The first part of this first part is the nature of governing faculty. It includes two parts. the identification of each governing faculty, and the establishment of a conclusion on the nature of the aspect of governing faculty. In this chapter, we will cover the 22 governing faculties. In the first chapter, which we just concluded, we talked about 6 faculties: the 5 sense faculties and the mental faculty. In this second chapter, we are now talking about 22 faculties. In this context, faculties are something with power. This is why we call them governing faculties, in relation to this idea of power over something. What are these 22 governing faculties? The first 6 are the 6 faculties said to be sensory faculties, but which are indeed the 5 sense faculties and the mental faculty. In other words, the 6 faculties that we talked about in chapter 1. Then there are 2 faculties connected to the body. We saw the governing faculty of body. From this governing faculty of the body, we separate out 2 other governing faculties: masculine governing faculty and feminine governing faculty. This refers to the masculine and feminine sexual organs. This brings us to 8 faculties, the 6 that we covered in the first chapter, plus masculine and feminine governing faculties. Then we have the governing faculty of life force, and here there's a little precision. When we talk about life force faculty, we're talking about life force itself. When we talk about governing faculty of I, we're talking about I. We're talking about the thing itself. Then we find the governing faculties of the 5 sensations, which brings us to 14. For the moment, there aren't any details on the 5 sensations. So we've reached 14. Then comes a group of 5 governing faculties: confidence or trust, joyful perseverance, attention memory, remembrance, and then discernment and meditative absorption. So this is a group of 5: confidence or trust, governing faculty, the governing faculty of joyful perseverance, the governing faculty of remembrance, the governing faculty of discernment, and the governing faculty of meditative absorption. These 5 bring us to 19. 3 remain. These 3 are called knowledge of all that has not been known, knowledge of all, and acquired omniscience. These last three are dissociated from factors for descent. We can repeat these three. The first one, knowledge of all that has not been known. Second one, knowledge of all. Third one, acquired omniscience. We'll repeat them one more time. Knowledge of all that has not been known, knowledge of all or knowledge of everything, and acquired omniscience. That's our time, so you'll find out what they correspond to tomorrow. Sanam di tamche zipani tomne ne petronam pamche ne kegana chi balak chupai sipe sole trowa shu.